Hey guys, we're back. Oh yes, we're back on the Mad Maker Show live. Live went what day?
Tuesday,
Tuesdays. Live at what time? 8
one
p.m.
one o'clock in the morning.
European time. European time. And here in the East Coast it's 8 p.m. East Coast time. Central time it's 7 p.m. That's where our guest is in that central time, or is it central time? What kind of area is that? No, that's for that mountain
I'm Mountain Time, so
mountain time.
6 for me.
6 o'clock.
Yeah.
You heard it here, folks. That's how time zones work and stuff. We want to welcome you guys to the Mad Maker Show. I'm feeling kind of silly and kind of happy because I'm gonna be interviewing along with JP, a very special guest, a good friend, Shogun Jimi. So stick around for that. If you guys are visiting for the first time, you know YouTube has this feature. It's called Live, and not for you guys that visit us, but for people that are wandering around. And we just decided to do a live show. And what it is that we call it the Mad Maker Show. We interview people that are completely off their rockers mad, but don't think we're talking mad insane like slasher movies and whatnot. That might be the case sometimes. No, not really. We're here to interview people that make things with their hands and are very creative, and by default these people think outside the box, um, although there's still a box outside the box, and so on and so forth. It just keeps going, and these people do have creative way of looking at life, and so we find it very interesting to interview these people, and that's what we do. So we call it the Mad Maker Show. You could visit us at themadmakershow.com, and that kind of helps support. If you go and visit the Mad Maker, I can't stress it enough. It really does help. It just to check it out, right? Check out the website, and so yeah. My name is Eloy, and JP Woodworks. Jamie Page is the co-host. JP.
How you doing? How you doing, everybody? I'm here as always, drinking out of my Mancrafting mug. You can get your very own Mancrafting mug from mancraftingtm.com. My YouTube channel is JP Woodwork. My Twitter and Instagram is JP_Woodwork. My website is jp-woodwork.com. I am 1/5 of the Makers International podcast. You can find that website at makersinternationalpodcast.com. Both websites are sponsored by Steve Nealon at Harnealmedia. You can find his website at harnealmedia.com. And speaking of the the podcast, next week's guest will be none other than Eloy Escajado. We shall be going live.
What?
We shall be going live over on the podcast YouTube channel at Makers International at 4:30 Eastern Standard Time on Sunday. So yeah, we'll love to see you if you've got any questions for Eloy. So the roles will be kind of reversed over onto Eloy. A couple of bits of community news to bring out to you, everybody. A couple of people have passed 1,000 subscribers this week. First one being Dirk Gibbons from Sumo's Projects, and the second one being Sophie from Make It Soph. So well done to both of you two. That's everything from the time being. So back to you, Eloy.
Well, thank you for that, dude. I'm kind of a little bit like nervous to go and be interviewed. I mean, I'm perfectly willing to hit you guys with questions. Like that's such a comfortable place to be, right? Like reading a book, you're sitting there and you're taking in the information, but now I have to reveal stuff. Dang, dude.
I don't feel I need to ask you boxers or briefs because I stayed with you for a few days in Miami.
That's right.
Kind of know the answer.
That's right. European G-strings.
Yeah. Before you two get to your show, and before you start highlighting Mr. Shogun Jimi, I've actually got a question for both of you.
Shoot.
Who is the original skull guy. Discuss.
I think it'd have to be Eloy because I didn't actually do a skull until I challenged Eloy. So between the two of us, it'd be Eloy, clearly. But I think JP's trying to hide something, and there's another skull person out there we need to know.
Well, I did actually make a skull chair. I don't even know where it is, to be honest. It's hanging about here somewhere. I actually made a little replica of Eloy's skull chair out of popsicle sticks.
Yeah, I remember that.
It's about somewhere. I don't know where it is. So, yeah. Oh, I made a little skull and spade.
Well, that's cool.
Nice.
Winged bowl for Brett McAfee as well.
Yeah.
Who's another guest that we've had on here. So, yeah.
All right. I'm gonna have to go with Shogun Jimi's answer. But we're gonna get so we're close friends and there's a lot to talk about. So I want to welcome Shogun Jimi to the show, dude. Welcome.
Well, nice to be here, Eloy. It's always fun chatting with you.
Yeah, dude. For a while there, we were, I guess, time as it goes. For a while there, we were chatting a lot, and then, I went off doing my stuff, and you were busy doing your stuff, and you know how it is. And we talk a little bit here and there, but there was a time earlier on when we did a lot of talking, collaboration, and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah. You were the first person that I actually asked to collab with. So, even though you were the third person I collabed with. So that's kind of a fun story too.
Yeah, I guess we'll start. I guess we can start with that. Just so Shogun Jimi, I was doing my woodworking channel. I started woodwork. I started on YouTube in 2006 doing music, and life and stuff. And then all of a sudden, boom, 2015, I started a woodworking channel, and shortly thereafter, I don't remember exactly, but I don't know if I ran into you or you ran into me. Do you remember that?
I don't know. I think we both just ran into each other. I think what really happened is you were somewhere around 500 subs, and I put up my first video, and you were one of the first 15 people to see my video and commented, and then I went and checked your channel out, and I think I might have even known who your channel was prior, but we just ended up starting to talk and back and forth through comments, and then somehow we ended up on Facebook.
Yeah, so. It's funny because however that happened, I don't know if I ran into yours. You were setting up your shop. It was like a fresh, and actually it was your intro video where you said, hey guys, on my channel, we're going to be doing such and such, and I want to do challenges and this and that. And I saw that, and you reached out to me and said, hey man, let's do a challenge or some sort of, and I was really not open to that suggestion. Because to me, it was the whole thing was I'll do a video and put it out there, and if folks like it, I'll comment in the comments section. I'll check out their channels. But as far as collaborations with other people, my vision wasn't there, and you opened up my mind to think in those terms. Why did you start with that as a fundamental thing?
I think it was just exposure for other channels and getting to know the people. I mean, that's been the greatest thing that I've found in the maker community is actually meeting the people. I mean, the community is just so awesome. I mean, I just wish I knew what I knew now there at the beginning, because I would have probably been there a little earlier to the party, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, it was such a cool thing, dude. And we've exchanged a few gifts, handmade items, mostly on my end, I went to, and it was delayed, but I went to the Everglades. I even shot a video of it to get you an alligator skull head, and a shirt, I think it was.
Yeah. A Florida speed bump.
Yeah. And you sent me an awesome wall-hanging plaque with a skull with exotic woods on it, my name on it, skull. So you challenged me to a skull off, and we started off on that. But you've done a lot of collabs with a lot of different people. Who have they been? Because you've mentioned them to me, but let the folks out there know.
It started with Mike from Kinderhook. He challenged me to make some nunchucks, Alan Robinson, the woodworking junkie, he saw that and was just like, "Ooh, I could challenge. That's great." So over a weekend, I was at the Comic-Con, and I just got email after email after email from him, almost like texting. And by the end of like a half-hour conversation with him, it was into the Toolbox Challenge, which also was, he did a whole bunch of hyperbole about a pirate ship, so many meters and all kinds of exotic stuff. It was quite a lot of fun. And then after that, I did like some kind of talking video, and I mentioned your channel, and I just said that all you could do is skulls, skull wallets, skull chairs, skull this, skull that. And that's when I hit you with a text message just saying, hey, my language was a lot of fun, because all I did was just challenge you, saying that all you could do is skulls. So you replied with, I think, the most perfect video that's ever happened. That was a lot of fun. I giggled for a couple days over that, and I still have a lot of fun watching that video.
That opened me up. That challenge thing really did open me up. Go ahead.
And then a little while later, we ended up doing the whole Maker's Rock thing, which was just a super blast. I mean, that was you, me, Alan again, Ryan from Waylight Creations, Steve Carmichael, and I think I'm missing someone. Oh, and you. Yeah. The first six of us. And you guys are about ready to do the third iteration of Maker's Rock. So what albums are you guys doing? I'm really curious.
I'm doing Mike Oldfield, Tubular Bells 2.
Yeah, there's a lot let me answer that, but let me thank Be Happy John. I appreciate that. I asked JP to put your channel. John from Be Happy Woodworking. So he's maybe a month ago recent member of Makers Media Network, and in fact, all of us here in this interview and a lot of you guys out there are members of Makers Media Network, and it's been great getting to know John. He lives up there. I can say up there because I live in Florida. He's up there in Georgia. That's like one of the few times you can actually say, well, up there in Georgia, along with Portal Woodworks and a few others. So thank you so much, dude. I appreciate that very kindly. So JP is doing Tubular Bells, but originally he was going to do, I think it was the Division Bell by Pink Floyd.
Yeah, originally, yeah.
But somehow he changed his mind, and then he reached out to me and said, hey, Eloy, I'm going to be doing such and such album. Could you write a song in reference to that? And I didn't really know that album, but he said it's the soundtrack to The Exorcist, And you would think, I mean, and so I went and checked it out. And so right away, the next day, I wrote the whole song, recorded it, and I put it out as a free download on my website, rock, the letter N, woodworks.com. I have a whole bunch of free songs there for folks to be able to go and download and use them as they so choose in their content and whatnot. And I have paid as well. At the time of this recording, this live event, the single tracks, single music are $1.19, right? And it just helps keep us, going. So it's not very onery as far as the pricing, and it's all original music. So anyway, so JP, he did that. He said, hey man, could you write? And I wrote that for him. My pick is Queensryche's Empire, which I always love that album.
Nice. Actually, when you start talking about music, I also reached out to you to do the Skull Challenge music, which I think turned out phenomenal. I actually have to thank you again, Eloy. That was just spectacular. Yeah,
dude. And you know what? Also, you did a collab because you really, a cool thing, and we haven't started really the interview part as far as like getting to know you. We're just talking amongst us. But what's cool is that either you reached out or I think you reached out to a dude that does all this like wicked metalworking stuff. What's his name?
Yeah, you're talking about the Green Beetle. When I did that collab too, I wanted some specific music for that. And I reached out to you, and you gave me this really nice blues tune for that, and that turned out. I'm still going to be using that here pretty soon, I'm sure. And that was one of my first big collabs, was with the Green Beetle. I mean, I had 200 subs, and he had 90,000 subs at the time, and I was able to collab with him. That was just phenomenal. I collabed with him again just at the end of the year, 2017. So it's just so nice to meet all these people in the community.
So tell us about, you've had recently you had a couple of videos do some extraordinary things for you guys out there. So it's like they went mega, these videos, but they didn't go mega on YouTube. Can you hit us with a little, like really give it to us so that we know what happened to you?
I think where it very first started is I made my bench for my kitchen, and I turned the top of the bench into a nice segmented top. And one of the other guys that I talk with all the time, Michael Zerker, said, you know, I got 1,000 views when I first posted it, and then it just died. It was running at 8 views a day. And he was just like, no, it's going to pop. It's going to take off. And it was like a month later, he, or the video just started gaining ground. I was getting like 100 views a day. Then it was like 300 views a day. And the next thing you know, it was like 7,000 views a day. And that video took off. And from that video, just smashing it there for like a month, I started getting some attention from some Facebook groups that reached out to me wanting to use my videos on their channel. So they pretty much asked for permission to use my videos. That same bench video on YouTube, I think, is somewhere around 6 million views. And then the skull challenge table that I made with you all those years ago, one of them used the skull table on theirs, and that one got 6 million on one edit. And that was really, I was just so spectacular to see that video take off like that. I mean, even say that my videos have been hitting 1 million views, I just love saying it, I guess.
That's great. That's a lot of eyes. And just for the record, on my end of it, that skull table that you created, which you guys out there should check it out. Really cool. So he takes diamond plating and using epoxy, and he just makes a massively awesome freaking table. Well, my friend, he's a total rock and roller. My friend that's a drummer, his name is Ramses, and I talk about him all the time. You know, he's a total aficionado of 1980s hair metal rock, and he's a great drummer. Well, he reached out to me, and you know, he gets busy, but he made it a point to reach out when he saw that, because I had shared your video. He's like, dude, he totally kicked your butt because of our. What was my collab part? What the hell?
You just challenged me. That was the thing. You didn't have to do anything. You just said you talk smack about me making skulls. Now you make one, and that's what I came out with. So
right,
yeah. Because I think most of the challenges and collabs that I've been into have been much more not really a competition against another person, but it's just to see what the person could do the best that they could do. You know, so I wasn't really like trying to like updo you. I was just doing the best that I could do for what I kind of had envisioned. I think that's what a lot of my challenges are for. I mean, I think that same spirit lives in Maker's Rock as well.
Oh yeah, totally. I just want to say, but for my friend, it's about I'm gonna kick your butt, right?
Sure.
So like he made it a point to let me know that you wiped my face with it, right? JP.
Yes, mate. There's a few questions that I've got already, but I'm going to quickly run through the chat to let everyone know who's out there. Sure. We've got Michael Zercher, who's just said, Michael Zercher, who's that? Be Happy Woodworking Honeybees, which is John. 5x30 Woodworking, which is Julian from Texas. Or not from Texas. Mr. Havy, Wolfcraft, You Do It, Jim Bashirs, Mark Lindsay, Vintage Wood Workshop. Let's keep going. Matt Huss. Let's keep going up. Doc's out there. Let's keep going. NJ Printing, Crosscut Creations. Russ Clarity and Robin Jacobson was out there, but she had to run. And the wife is out there.
Yeah, Miss Valerie Mora, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, STM Customs is up there. Muddy Fences has just turned up as well. Dan the Maker Man's just turned up as well. First one is from the wife. So, what did you do with the skull table?
Still in my kitchen. I think somewhere halfway through this year, I have plans on actually doing my own table completely from scratch. So after that point, I'll probably do something a little more different with that table.
I'll ask the second question from the better half.
Sure.
She says, what does Shogun Jimi think of child labor laws?
Well, it's a fun question because I used to ask my kids about that all the time. And they'd be like, you know, they'd be like 6, 7 years old. And I'd be like, hey, what do you know about child labor laws? And they'd say, nothing. And I'm like, me neither. Get back to work.
Fair enough.
Sure.
He got a question here from Russ at Simply Wooden Creations. He says, where did you get the name Shogun Jimi?
Shogun Jimi started when I got my email account, probably in like 06 or something like that. I had just read a book called Shogun from the English author James Clavell, and I just loved the character that was the Shogun. His name is Toranaga, and it was just when I went to write in my email account, I just kind of took it as a pseudonym and ran with it. And when I started moving into like Reddit and some of the other channels or social medias, I just started shortening it down to Shogun Jimi because it used to be Shogun Jimi James. Because Jimmy James is a name that I really like as well. Because I'm like a Gemini, so Jimmy and James is really Gemini for me. Like amongst my friends, and by the way, I really want to put this out there. I prefer the name Jimmy. When I'm talking to you guys, you're my buddies, you're my family. I like Jimmy. When I meet people and I don't know them, they're on the street or at my job or something like that, I introduce myself more formally as James. So if you guys call me Jimmy, I know you guys are like close to me. And if you guys call me James, it's like, not quite preferred, you know?
And what if we start with Shogun? Like
Shogun's fine. I'm starting to really like it a lot, actually. I'm almost thinking of changing my channel to the Shogun Workshop. But I don't know. I might just stick with Shogun Jimi just because it's who I am.
Fair play. Question from Michael Zurcher. Said, ask Jimmy when he's going to give in and give me his CNC.
I can't. The CNC no longer belongs to me. It is actually Valerie Mora. She owns the CNC at this point. So he's going to have to ask my wife for the CNC. And I think he already knows most of that.
Okay. One question from Matt Huss from Awesome Wood Things and Awesome Fun Things. And there's another channel. I forget what that is. So it's something to do with learning Adobe, I believe, but I forget the channel name. The question is, does Jimmy use a DSLR, or because I think he's still using his mobile phone?
I did buy a DSLR, but it takes the wrong video formats. I kind of bought into the lower end version of it, unfortunately. So I'm still working with my cell phone. But I think I got a camera that does better thumbnail pictures. That's what I'm hoping it does.
Yeah.
Thumbnails are really, really important. The thumbnail for my bench that took off, Michael Zerker, he's the one who actually edited it and like put it where it was. That was why he was a little interested on how that video would go. And I think that, I mean, it's a good 50% of why that video did so well is the thumbnail.
Yeah.
So
I made a point to ask Michael's question because he kind of cries when you ignore him. We've got a question from Crosscut Creations. Says, will Jimmy bring back the #LayTheDiction series?
That's not going to stop. I actually have a really good plan for #LayTheDiction. Someone put a gift in the mail for me today. I should get it in the next few days. Unfortunately, I'll turn and burn the pin very quickly. But the video will not come out until another thing comes out in the mail. But we're talking that might be another 2 months away. And I hate to be cryptic, but I think that video is going to be pretty epic. I'm looking forward to that one.
Great stuff. That's it for now, Eloy.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start the interview like a normal although we've started the interview.
So can we start the interview my way a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead, dude.
All All right, let's try and put it this way, Eloy. Me and you privately have had some really good conversations. I thought they were really good anyways.
Yeah, totally.
And one of the goals that I really want to do with the Mad Maker show tonight was to kind of have a little bit more of those conversations, just a little more public. So if you want to give it a try,
okay,
let's hit the fences.
Okay, so let's do some of that, but
Yeah.
I want to also sort of bookmark so that they know a little bit about your past. So what I'll ask you first is, before we get to that, is can you give us a little bit of background, where you're at, where you're from, a little bit of history, the way you want to tell it, so that we all know a little bit more about you and we can record it for the books, just to hear from you.
Yeah, a little bit about me is I'm from Denver, Colorado. And somewhere along the line, I've always been more of an autodialectic, as someone who trains and teaches themselves. When I was like 18 years old, I was studying like Bruce Lee, and I was out there making the wooden dummies and a whole bunch of karate. And I made, bow staffs, nunchucks. I made a tri-staff, which is a lot of fun. So like I just go out and experiment and have fun all on my own. But it's really great that I start with Bruce Lee, as he's one of the very first books that I've read in philosophy itself. And Bruce Lee, even though like you would think, he's an actor, kind of fake in that kind of realm and this and that, his book is no joke. It's a very legitimate philosophy book. It's quite Eastern compared to anything that would be like Western philosophy. And then years later, speed up almost 15 years later, I kind of just took a different position at my job where I became a supervisor. And my boss at the time got me really heavy into reading books. It started with like leadership. And then one of the leadership books veered off into psychology. And it's still leadership, but it was psychology. And I just really got enamored and loved that book for the psychology. So I took a psychology course and read a couple more psychology books and just really got really into it. And then there was a down period where I was kind of like, okay, well, I kind of got the idea of psychology, but I really wanted to, spend my time to utilize my time as best I can. So I moved over into economics, because I was like, if I'm going to use my mind for something, it should probably make money. I got back to a book called The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. And what it is halfway through his book, he just starts turning into economics. But the very first part of the book is moral philosophy. And I very much enjoyed that. And that opened my door for philosophy in general. And then I think I'm about 8 years into studying philosophy as an autodialectic. So I end up just buying the book, reading it, figuring out what I like in it or what I don't like in it, and just plowing through that. And that's kind of the basis of where I want to take our kind of mad makerdom tonight, is to really delve in those things that I think a lot of people just ignore or hide from to a degree.
Okay, I totally get it, and we could do that. But is there anything else that you want to share before we get into a little bit of that, from your past? Anything?
I don't know. Am I forgetting something?
It kind of sounds like you're digging for something.
No, not digging. I want more texture to place you. Just a memorable thought growing up. It could be, just things of that effect, anything. Now, if you feel it's strained, that's good too, in a way, because what is he digging for? Well, is there any memory, family, anything? Give us a little bit. Can you give us a little bit, right?
My family's kind of strange too. My parents right now are kind of more into the phase of like cramming for the final exam. But when I was raised, I was always more of a metalhead, and like I actually hung around with a lot of stoner kids who a lot of people would consider them satanic, if you will. Always drawing like not only upside down crosses, but trifixions and skulls and blood and stuff like that. It's really weird. When I actually hung out with them, they were always the I'm going to use my quotes here. They were always the black souls. and I, however, was the white soul. So I was, I was definitely accepted and quite family with them. But when it came time for the Ouija board, I was pretty much cursed out from the Ouija board and would have to leave pretty much the vicinity. So I would just be like, oh, I'm going home for the day. And it was a lot of fun to kind of be in that kind of situation. So,
very interesting. Yeah. Well, that opens up more questions and roads than it closes, but we'll leave it at that
sure.
for now. That's awesome.
Yeah.
OJ, dude, thank you so much. OJ, JP, could you add his channel link down below
yes,
there?
Mate, yeah, I will do. There's a quick question from Dan the Maker Man.
Yes.
He said, when or with what project did Jimmy catch the maker bug?
Actually, that's where we're leading into is I got the maker bug either from my father as a child. Like I said, I was making wooden dummies and still in his wood and stuff like that in the past. But it was through philosophy where that's when I first started catching more philosophy videos on YouTube that led into maker videos. Because when it comes to philosophy, a lot of the philosophers that I listen to and really appreciate are the ones that their hero is the person who goes out and solves like society's problems, whether if it's a physical object that you would make with your hands or even like a mental one. So philosophy has definitely led me to who I am as a maker and as someone who puts things together with my hands.
All right. Well, listen, OJ. So OJ, for you guys that don't know, but you kind of all know him. He turns awesome. You should see the works that he turns. He has a channel here on YouTube, and he's also, funny enough, part of the maker community here with us, the Makers Media Network. So you can even see his bio up on makersmedianetwork.com, along with every member, and you'd be surprised at the members that we have. But I just wanted to thank OJ again. So Shogun, let's do that then. Let's delve into. So I was surprised, for me, philosophy is a very interesting and important focus. I'm an unlearned person. I'm an instinctual person. I'm a perceptive person. But with all that said, I am, as we all are, very flawed and limited. Like, you can only focus on, although you can have many things in your subconscious going on at the same time, but you can only truly, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but have a focal point, one thing at a time. I find that that's the thing that limits human beings, and we are what we are. I mean, and thank goodness we have the ability to reason and think. But like I was talking to the cats earlier, and when you have a conversation with someone, let's say it's a confrontation of sorts, not violent, but like a confrontation where there's two people setting forth an argument, a conversation to solve a thing. If I were to say a thing, it's not necessarily so, but it could be that people will say, oh, that's his thought, his position. And although there's more to what you think, you can only say one thing at a time. So it's like a snowfall effect, snowballs rolling down a hill. You can't put everything on a plate and say, hey, boom, this is what I think. So we're limited, even in conversation. It's one thing at a time, and all these variables split everywhere. But anyways, philosophy, tell us.
Well, actually, it's a really good point that you're talking about confrontation and those sorts of things with philosophy, and then only being able to focus on one thing. I think that's why a good 95% of philosophy is all written down, because I think one of the philosophers, Immanuel Kant, really talks about it was in like an essay on enlightenment where, the cops are out there, they're stopping like this madman on the street and things are going down, and say the cops like break the law in their apprehension of that. It is not at that point that you stop the interaction because they broke the law. Is that you go to court and you settle it like in the long run, kind of a wise man version of it, instead of like in the action, So it's I think 95% of philosophy is written down just because things are so complex.
Yeah.
When we actually start talking about philosophy in general, one of the first sciences that I really enjoy with philosophy is called philology. And when you break that out into the Greek wording, that is the love of the word. So basically, one of the words that I want to talk about tonight was your apprehension of madness.
Okay.
So, I think a lot of people actually, when they hear mad or madness in general, they fade into the anger issue. And madness really has nothing to do with angry. Madness could just be like an alternative viewpoint of the world, and he's mad because he's not with all the same people over here. So, all the same people over here are pointing at the one loner as mad because, he's shunned society for himself and he's out there on his own and he's mad. So there's a different variance on madness opposed to just being angry.
Yeah.
Our usage of mad in an angry tone has changed the word. You could actually find it in dictionaries that way, but I think the origins is not
Yeah.
in anger.
I totally. That's exactly, and that's why we use it. It doesn't mean anger, although many people, and in fact, it's funny because, growing up, remember Mad Magazine, and it was a silly thing, and it was quirky, but it's kind of has to do with quirkiness, being an oddball, being able to see. So I find that the maker community, like all of us, and it's a funny thing, okay, because I grew up being a musician, and I will tell you right now, I hate to say it, musicians are insufferable. Insufferable. Because the one guy's got the guitar, and I'm the guitarist, and I'm such a badass, and the world belongs to the guitar and me. And then you got the singer, I've got my long hair, and screw the guitarist, and I'm the drummer, I'm gonna drown you all out. And there's this whole selfish thing involved with musicians, and there's plenty of awesome musicians. But the maker community, and we're all human, we all have certain flaws. There's this spirit that goes beyond, for me, what you'd see with musicians. A person that wakes up, his or her eyes open up, and they're like, I'm going to create something. And they do it. These people. To me, so, and these people are, I would have to, I don't want to speak for them, but I guess I'm going to a little bit. They're seen, if people focus on them, they're not normal in the sense of that they follow the same path.
Yeah. So another word that comes to mind that actually fits right in with madness is intoxication. Intoxication, again, I think has it would have to have several meanings. One would be like drinking and drugs, and your mind is intoxicated because you're now outside of your control. But then there's another realm where intoxication comes through a word that's also very complex to cope with, which is called the sublime. And the sublime is really interesting, especially with creative types. You might have your bone to pick with musicians and this and that, but at the act of inception where you invent what you're dealing with, whether if it's in music or whether if it's in like Makerdom or whatever, when you got that spark of idea in your head and you had that envision in your head and it just enraptured the whole entire of your mind about what you wanted to focus upon, that's intoxication. You're reaching the sublime, but you're also intoxicated to the point where, the way I kind of talk about intoxication is when you go to a concert. Think about a scientist going to a concert. They could sit back and they could sit there and run out, he's in this time signature, he's running these scales, he's running these modes, he's doing this kind of rhythm, and he could sit there and diagnose what the music's going about. Well, that's boring. In fact, the word for that is nihilism. He believes in nothing other than what's reaching out for pure science. I go to Slayer concerts and I'm in the sublime. I'm in the moment. I'm intoxicated. When I'm out there, the music is just flowing through my entire body. I'm running around in a pit. I'm hitting people in a sense, and people are hitting me, colliding. And it's, my feet are no longer on the ground like the nihilist, the scientist guy. My feet, even though they are touching the ground to make me run and propel, I'm flying. And that's what intoxication means to me to a certain degree. And you know, it's madness, you know.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with you on those definitions. And
Yeah.
you know, beyond that, for me, and tell me, I mean, so you know, I've always been fascinated with the fact of, and it's gonna sound stupid and yet not stupid at the same time, depending on who you are. But I'm constantly jaw dropped at the experience that we call life, and not just saying that. It's like, how the heck is it? You know, and it sounds ridiculous, but at the same time, it's not if you really think about it, because nobody knows what the heck is going on. We don't know
Yeah.
what the heck is going on.
Yeah.
We really don't know what the heck is going on, except that we are conscious, whatever that means. You know, that whole trip that we're experiencing as observers of this reality, of this experience, that whole thing, to me, is the biggest jaw dropper of it all. What does it all mean? What the heck does it all mean? Why do things have to be the way that, you know, like there's this huge current of, well, this is how things are done.
Yeah.
This is a current. And I'm like, all my life, I'm like, well, okay, I understand, but let's go off the riverbank a little bit, you know, with thought, etc. We're not normal.
Yeah.
You,
Well,
JP, none of us.
you guys have seen The Matrix, right?
Yes.
There's basically a really good like philosophical base to the actual movie The Matrix, and one of the actual understandings that come from that is that we've never been able to scientifically stamp upon the idea that you even exist. We know in our consciousness that we understand how we think and we behave, this and that, but it's really hard to go in someone else's brain and understand what they're doing. And you know, when it comes down to it philosophically, we can't prove that anything other than our consciousness exists for itself. So honestly, we can't say that we could prove that you exist. You could just be completely a dream state of my imagination.
Yeah. Or we could be fragments of a higher, for lack of a better word, being's imagination. We could be compartmentalized. You and I and JP and everyone out here in the chat and folks over on Facebook because they decided not to come over, and the other guys sitting at home watching Netflix, and 3 guys on a ship sailing across. We could all be fragmentations of a consciousness that decided, or either decided or didn't decide. We don't even know. Fragments of his or her own reality, and they would say something like this: I will fragment my existence, my consciousness, into small little cubes, and they will go off, and I'll see how they interact. All this is possible. You and I could be part of the same thing, and maybe not. Maybe it could be completely so. The fact of not knowing and yet entertaining these thoughts, um, it, I that happens to me quite a lot. And by the way, not being a learned person, it's just a thing that happens, I guess, instinctually. I don't know. Um, those are thoughts that occur, and why not? What do you think about that?
I don't know. What's coming to my head to some degree is, have you ever thought too much about you've already thought about the consciousness that you have. Have you ever heard of the social consciousness? Where there's been a psychology test happen where they took people and they put them underground, and they were down there for like 6 weeks. Somewhere in the 6 weeks, they started feeding them like 3-day-old crossword puzzles. And in this experiment, what had happened is, once everyone else in the world had solved the crossword puzzles, everyone got like a 50% or like an 80% upgrade to their capability of dealing with crossword puzzles. So the answers were, as they would say, in the air, and they were just able to connect with the crossword puzzles. So if you were already, like, say, not even very proficient at crossword puzzles, your ability after you've dealt with a 4-day late crossword puzzle was enhanced just because of the answers being in the air. I mean, and that's absolutely mad when you think about it. Another psychology test was they started dealing with interviews, and this is one of those psychology things where the guy's telling the college, and he's in front of his peers, and he's saying, "This is the evidence. This is not what I'm saying. This is the evidence." And they were throwing books at him and booing him off stage, if you will. I mean, it was just highbrow violence, if you will. And what it was is they would have someone go through the elevator with the person who was like the controlled person, the person that is off the street. And the person in the elevator would hand him either a hot or a cold cup of water. And if he was handed a hot cup of water, when they went upstairs and interviewed the person for the job, he'd immediately hate them. And then we're talking at like an 85% profile, where it was just like he'd walk in the room and it'd just be like, that person's the wrong person for this or that. And if you handed him the cold water, it'd be like a fair assessment of the interview. So, I mean, psychology and our way we deal with behaviors is just mind-boggling. I mean,
I just want to be clear. Just this is my this is my belief, and it can be faulty. Like, I'm always open. Like, I'm a strong believer in the saying, "All I know is that I know nothing." I think that that's a good. For me, I think that that's a good. Not even start. It's a good position to start with, I guess, or to be in, because the moment you start believing that you know a thing, you close off a bunch of possibilities because you think that, oh, well, I got that covered. And of course, this is reasonable for mundane things, like, I'm going to throw some class at you. Some mundane things like wiping your butt, right? You don't want to reinvent the wheel. There's a chipmunk up there on a tree. I'm not going to touch that toilet paper. I'm going to go over there. That was my classy moment. But for mundane things, you want to put that to the side. But for you don't want to think you know. You start to take things for granted, people for granted. And we do that very often. And I do that very often. You can think you know a person, you can know, but we're all living an experience, right? So I like to start from that. All I know is that I know nothing, and work from.
Do you know who said that?
Was that Aristotle? Was it Plato? One of them cats?
It's one of those cats. One of the early Greeks. His name's Socrates.
Socrates.
And
so
we actually get in, yeah. So when we actually start talking about Socrates and Plato, is you really can't divorce them. Basically, what had happened is Socrates never wrote anything, and Plato was a writer before he met Socrates, and he writes, 40 books on on Socrates' life. So I mean, it's pretty much, that's where he starts as well. What kind of happened for him though is they were really big into oracles at the time, and the oracles of Athens, the Delphi oracles. He went to go see them, and he wanted to know what was going on with his life in essence. And the reading that came back was the idea that he was the wisest man, and that spooked him because he, like what you're saying, his belief was that he knew nothing. For what I know that I know nothing is kind of the way he says it. So he's totally, like, at this point, on a mission from, the Greek gods, if you will, from he's an Apollo follower. That's the god he really paid attention to. And Apollo is a really interesting god. But at this point, he's on a mission from God. So he goes and rounds up the wisest man everywhere that he could actually approach. And he's, at this point, fairly wise. So he has a reputation of having these conversations. And he'd be asking these people who were considered the wisest of the Greeks. And he would basically say, well, what do you know? And then his Socratic questioning is basically, he would basically take what they knew and say, well, I don't think you know it as good as you knew. So he would take the person who was the most intelligent around, and then they would leave almost baffling themselves and lost by the way he would question them. So, I mean, he would make the smartest man, the most educated man of his time appear like he knew nothing by the end of a conversation. And that's a lot of what the dialogues are about.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean,
so
unlike him, I'm literally saying I'm literally saying no. Well, he's saying it too, but that humbling of, I mean, because we really are. We have a consciousness. We have a instinct. You could call it soul. You could interchange all these. I mean, these are definitions that we use, but there's something there that's not quite attainable, or just further beyond the grasp of your hand. We're living in existence, right? And it's always, there's no way I could say to anyone, hey, look, buddy, sit your butt down. This is how this works officially, for when talking about the great scheme of things. But you can talk and ponder and put forth ideas out there, but never with the, or at least this is my opinion, how I look at it, never with a precision sort of like, this is true and it cannot change. I'm open to suggestions.
Yeah.
But I have to, my convictions would have to be overcome by incredible, surmounting odds, proof, So yeah.
So can I give you a little description of how I see philosophy?
Yeah.
In essence, is basically philosophy, as Socrates says, philosophy begins in wonder. And as you're wondering about this object that's in front of you, or this obstacle that's in front of you, you're perplexed. And basically, as soon as you start discovering things, like you pull off a little clay and you molded it, and now you know what you know now, that turns into psychology, or you turn this into, okay, now I know geometry and mathematics. And basically, the way I understand philosophy is that it would be basically the activity of the mind solving things that are unsolvable. So all of the philosophy conversations that I'm part of throughout, all my studies and stuff like that, what it really comes down to is, it is the unanswerable questions. Why do we still read Plato? Plato is still read because the specific things that he is talking about, they're not answered to this day. And we're talking 2,500 years ago. One of his main books is The Republic and its justice. Do you have a definition of justice? And I'm more than certainly that you do not have a definition of justice. We could give you some, concepts, and we'd put them in a bubble, and it's like, well, these make us feel happy now, but will those same things we just put in that bubble be happy for the people 80 years from now? Because I think it's completely unjust to say our bubble of happiness is going to last for all eternity. And as soon as you put certain things into the bubble, someone may not like that as well. I think some people understand a concept called the golden rule, and it's very Christian in doctrine. And basically, it says, treat others as you wish to be treated. Well,
I'm totally, just for the record, as far as I'm totally down and agreeing to that rule. And with that said, remember, that's just one statement from a person where there's more to it than that. But just as a point, I'm totally down with that.
Okay. Well, let's crush the dream, Eloy.
Well, I don't think you will be able to.
Well, let's try. Let's try.
Here's the thing. Well, before you try, I do not believe that you will be able to, and I will give you one bit of help so that it can be discarded. I do understand that there's multi-tiered situations where that would come into question.
Yeah.
Right? I do understand that. Like, I have thought of this, but with that said, I believe, like, all I know is that I know nothing. It's a good place to start from. It doesn't mean that you don't make decisions when things become complicated. So I'll just leave it at that, and let you do it. But I understand that it's not as simple as just the saying, and then that's it as a whole. Is that fair for me to? Does that put a little bit of a tangle in your?
One of the things that I highly respect in philosophy is someone who behaves in a sense of naivety, being naive. And what it is, you know, the golden rule doesn't work because the serial killer will treat you the way he'd want to be treated. You know, and we get into pseudomasochism. Both of those scenarios do not work very well with you know, the golden rule, because, you know, pseudomasochism, I forget which way the word goes, is someone wants to inflict punishment on another person. He will treat the golden rule badly, and the same thing with a person who will be happy to be treated badly and punished cruelly. So basically, there's three scenarios right there that are just absolutely bad. You know,
Right,
the
but
golden rule also, I don't think works very well on the people who want to live in a society where everything is a padded room and safety, 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 safety. You know, I live on a different plane than that, and we could get back to that. But did you want to take questions?
no,
Yeah.
I will,
I mean,
but I just want to say this.
yeah.
And yes, JP, we will. I just want to say this. I believe, like I stated before, that it's appropriate. So if I were born in some other country, I don't know which one it would be, because I think that do unto others is pretty universal.
Yeah.
England.
Well, in England, I think that they do, like,
You could do the accent then.
so if you were to go up to somebody, you know, and whack them upside the head, that's not a very preferable scenario, because chances are nobody wants to get hit upside the head. So, you know, and you wouldn't want to get hit upside the head. So you operate under the rule, or that idea of do unto others. You operate under that. When you come across a situation with a person that is a psychopath, for instance, you may not know, but they flip it on you, and they're out to, you know, to get lunch from you. Then you no longer can operate in this situation, because now they want to, for instance, inflict pain. There's also, you have the right to defend yourself. So you have rights to defend yourself just by the fact of you being an organism. Even a cat will screech and frickin' claw at an adversary, because it wants to live, right? So there's a lot of dynamics involved with what you're saying, but I believe, and it's fair what you said, but I believe as a golden rule, to start off with what you said, with what I'm saying, the golden rule, and I understand and I agree with you, so there's no qualm there that there's going to be issues where that's not going to work. So yes, I agree with you, but I prefer to start with it as opposed to starting like you know, a complete maniac, for instance.
Well, that's what reason is about.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think what the Greeks are teaching, opposed to like the golden rule, is that each scenario does need its own evaluation. And that's when we get into the science of hermeneutics. And hermeneutics is actually a Greek word for interpretation.
Before we get to, there
yeah.
are questions. Okay, JP, I'm sorry.
Questions. Yeah. We could go on forever, Eloy. So let's get to questions.
Yeah, there's a few questions here. The first one is from Sterling. He says, does marijuana have anything to do with these thoughts and theories?
No. I haven't smoked pot in 20 years.
Javi would like to know, what's Jimmy's, ask Jimmy what his opinion is of genetic memory.
Genetic memory, I don't know. That's where it really begins with psychology of what does an infant actually start with in innate memory or innate knowledge. And I'm actually pretty much anti-innate knowledge, although there's a lot of good science and psychology that deals with it, especially like programming of bees and stuff like that, how they, you know, open up, live their life, they fulfill their mission, and it seems just effortless for us. But I'm pretty much that I think that the infant mind, when it's born to, you know, 5 to 10 years of age, it is actually a more superior mind and contraption in their head than we have now, because it is absolutely not limited by, like, you know, knowledge in its essence. The mind from an infant is actually taking in evidence and understanding of its environment at a faster rate, and it's better at interpreting of what's going on than we are as adults. We actually start pruning and losing things of our mind as we grow older.
Mhm.
And that's why children are always so much more inventive about how they're going to deal with the situation. I think in psychology, they give kids and adults paper clips, and they could ask them what they could do with the paper clip. And on average, I think a child could deal with like 20 different objects with one paper clip, where an adult is like, that's a fucking paper clip. You know, I don't know if I could cuss on this or not, but you know, adults are just like, that's what it is. It's done and over with, and we don't really have that much of an imagination towards it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's fair enough. Here's a question from Michael Zercher, and this one I thought this was actually a good question,
sure.
to be honest with you. He wants to know is, can you be intoxicated whilst being intoxicated? Deep thoughts.
Sure. Yeah, the answer is that actual real alcohol or drug intoxication actually gets you closer and sooner into the intoxication that I'm dealing with. Eloy loves the Doors just as much as I do, I believe. And they went out into the desert and had peyote or LSD, and they came back with stuff that we're still boggling on what they were dealing with then. And intoxication and actual real booze and drugs intoxication does slightly get you there. I think where a lot of musicians and a lot of the people in history have screwed it up is that they take their intoxication with actual assistance too far and for too long.
Well, it can also be a
Mhm.
crutch. I do want to speak to this, if I could, real quickly. So there are patterns of thought that might not occur to a human being that could be incredibly eye-opening and enlightening. And in fact, in different cultures throughout history, they've used natural, plants, and such.
Sure.
And it opens up certain moments of perception and stuff. And so we have a conscious mind and a subconscious mind. And there's a lot of things that go on in there. When I'm having this conversation right now with Jamie Page and Shogun Jimi and myself and all of you guys out there, we're interacting. We're all interacting here on different levels, and these moments that we're having, there are things that are happening with inside of us, information that's not brought forth. What we have present is my mind is thinking the words that are coming out that I'm thinking, but there's another level behind that and another one behind that all functions inside this computer, for lack of a better word. A lot of cultures use substances and in fact, a lot of cultures don't use substances, like towards, well, the Asian, China, Japan, they use Buddhism, and in order to attain certain vantage points and concepts that are stuck back in there somewhere. And last thing I'll say about this: sometimes I don't know if this happens to you. Please, I'd love to know this question. If you can answer this question for you guys, have you ever been doing something in your day to day, and all of a sudden something overtakes you in a moment, and you have a moment of, I'll just say, clarity or incredible, intense, deep, intuitive about something. It could be anything, but like an aha moment, that moment, just it's strong and potent, and it's there, where you understand a thing. Have you ever had that? Please, I'd like to know if you have. Well, anyways, I ramble, but
Yeah,
continue.
actually, the word is inspiration, where you are actually engaged with the spirit. You are inspired. You know, the spirit is within you. And yes, I've had one a very profound experience that had happened to me in the past. Is there's a book from a psychologist. His name is Carl Jung, and what he was doing is he was actually using a lot of hypnotist things to where he was programming his mind to where he'd have dreams. And then as he'd wake up in the morning, he'd write out his dreams. And that's what this book is. And he's a scientist, mind you. This book was not published during his lifetime. In fact, he died I think, in the 50s. And it didn't come out until 2008, where a whole bunch of scientists were like, begging the family to release this book. And I'm reading this book, and it's a very, very profound book. Just absolutely awesome. I've showed it on my channel before, called the Red Book. It was the book that's this huge, and he has a whole lot of illustrations. And the occurrence that had happened for me is I'm reading along, and there's this really great story in the book. And what I realize is, like, you know, on a conscious level, I'm like, wow, this is wrong. But then on like a subconscious level and something taking over, what had happened is I closed the book, put it down, and then I was mad dash for like 2.5 to 3 hours writing what he had done wrong in the book. You know, now, you know, it's his book and he wrote it his way. How am I to say he's wrong? But, you know, when the spirit hit me and it pushed me that way, I mean, I didn't stop to reread anything. I didn't, you know, sit there and worry about spell check or anything like that. I mean, it was just like, you know, from my mind, from the spirit, I was able to just plow through, you know, it was like 8 or 10 pages back and front about how I envisioned what he had got wrong in that part of the book. And it was just like, you know, it's unexplainable. It's inexplicable. You know, like I can't share that with you guys other than, okay, we could look at the text and will I even agree with it today? Because it happened 6-7 years ago, you know? But I mean, yeah, there's also another really good book called The Rise of the Superman. And it is kind of a little something that I wouldn't really recommend very well on a big scope and scale. But it does talk about this thing called the flow. And the way that that book really starts presenting, like, you know, what I would call inspiration is that they're very big in cases of extreme sports. And what it is, you know, they have a giant wave. We're talking like 80-foot wave. You look at it and you just see death. Well, there's those crazy fuckers that go out there and they're just like, I'm going to ride that thing. And basically, the first few times that they did it for years, they were towing them in with a jet ski so they could like get the speed to handle it and they could ride it. And that was fine. Well, this one guy basically said, well, I want to do this without the towing in. I just want to go in and drop in and live. And what he did is he spent like 6 or 9 months going and learning a whole nother sport. And I forget the name of it. But it's where they have a pulley at like, you know, 100 feet below the surface of the ocean. And then they would drag you down and then drag you up. And the whole part of this exercise was to learn how to breathe underwater for like 5 minutes and survive. You know, and it's a sport. I forget the name of it. So he went and spent 6 months learning this other sport. Well, he goes out there and he's like, today's the day. I'm going to go basically fall or surf this wave. And basically what's kind of being said in the book is that his mind was able to adjust to the scenarios, this and that, and he was able to survive. He, you know, rode out the wave like normal, no big deal. Nothing happened to him. He didn't die. And then they're saying around the world at the same time, within a week to a day to possibly an hour, is other people in their minds clicked and they could do the same thing. And we're talking, you know, they go through snowboarding, they go through extreme sports of all kinds, anything X Games. And they tell you about these same stories about how the mind just says, I'm a capable athlete. I just saw him do it. Now I could do it.
So was it free diving?
Free diving, they talk about through Transformers. They talk about the 3 guys, they're flying through buildings. You know, like they're in like a squirrel suit. And they're going in and out of buildings.
That's insane, dude. I've seen that's insane. Like if they put one of
is it parkour or something like that in it?
Yeah. The other one that really sets the example is, think about a snowboarder. They go to Alaska. They get on top of this mountain that no one's seen, you know, essentially, you know, probably someone's seen it. But they get dropped at the top of the mountain. They're good snowboarders and they go down. They don't know where the trees are at. They don't know where the cliffs are at. And they use their agility, but it's their mind agility that keeps them focused on all that. As they're going down that mountain, you know, at top speed, if their mind says, oh, the garbage needs to be taken out on Thursday, they could hit a tree. Whereas if their mind is completely in the flow and in focus, they're going to live.
That's why I never think about the garbage.
Sure.
Let me tell you something. What you said, and you said it twice. This sort of scenario where there's a social consciousness. You said
the collective consciousness.
Is that a collective consciousness? And so I don't know how to feel. I don't discount it. at all. Like the possibility is just as fair as the if I had to side, like now with lack of knowledge instinctively, I would say that to a greater, lesser degree that this is so. But it's a very interesting thing that people pick up and you know what, I would say that it's completely a possibility that there is that. It's a strange. It's almost there's almost a religious element to this, spiritual element to what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because this is not at all what, you know, science teaches. This concept that you're, and yet, like I've seen videos where they'll take ice and I don't know if this is true or not, but you guys could check this out. I don't know if I found it interesting. I don't, you know, anybody could do something on the internet and say, hey, it's true, but they either prayed on them or wrote on them different things, froze them, then they looked at them through a lens, and the ice crystals that formed, depending on what was said or focused on that ice or that water, has different crystal formations, and they have repeated the experiments, and you get similar results. I don't know if
I know what you're talking about, where I think they get like a potato or something like that, and someone will sing to it very lovingly every day for like 6 months or 3 months, and it grows beautifully. It does really well. And then they have someone over there with metal, and it turns to poison. It doesn't grow. It dehydrates. It turns black, and it dies. Essentially, it rots. And yeah, that's another thing that's really inexplicable. Like, we don't really understand like how that's going on. We like it. It's a great story, you know. And there's a guy, Norman Vincent Peale. He's like an old 50s leadership management guy, and his books are all The Power of Positivity. And it's just great because he really says like whatever you exude in the world is like what will return back to you. And his message at one point or another was like, you know, he was a God believer, and he was just like, okay, nothing could harm you in the world because God is inside of you. You are God, and live with God as your being. And it was funny, me being, you know, what would the word be? Kind of, you know, experimental, or at this point, I'm modern age, I guess. I just flipped it to where it was no longer the power of God that was resided in me. And this is where the joke really comes in. It was the power of Slayer that exuded from me, because, you know, here we're talking positively. It grows the plant, and then, you know, metal and anger kills the plant. But like, you know, Slayer, when I think about them, they give me something that's really, you know, something that warms me on the inside and that I just love. And it's primal. It's something that's spiritual that I just really can't explain.
All right, so awesome. So for you guys out there, this is we've had a few conversations like this in the past, just Jimmy and I sitting around. By the way, my dog is scratching on my chair now. You can hear can you hear his little paws going click, click, clack on the floor?
Yeah. You want to take him out while Jamie asks me some questions?
Well, oh, there he starts hacking now. Like, he's totally wanting to be in the show. JP, questions for Shogun, and I have a few questions of my own, but let my dog out.
Yeah, we've got a few. So right, we've got one from Jim Dockrell. He says, Jung or Freud, which does Jimmy relate to more?
It's no question. I love Jung. I think Freud is a hack, and he was fairly miserable. So basically, Jung all the way. The most I've ever spent on any book whatsoever has twice been Jung. The Red Book, I think it was well over $200, and then he did a seminar in Switzerland for like 8 years where he was studying the book that I read the most. I come back to it every month. I read a chapter or two. So I mean, it's Jung, who's a very intelligent person, talking about the book that I read.
Fair play, fair play. Dan the Maker Man, Has anyone, hang on a minute. Yeah, has anyone looked into people that are not part of the collective consciousness?
Well, that's the thing, is it's not a voluntary thing. You're just in, like, you're just part of it. I know there's a lot of people who don't believe they're involved. They scientifically can't explain it. But if you're alive, you're breathing, you're part of it. It's a democracy.
So there we go. Right. Let's have a look. Chip builds. What was the first project you made?
Ooh.
About the woodworking.
Yeah, when I was about 12 or so, I think CDs were just coming out, and I made a nice oak veneer CD case with the help of my dad. We did some dados, and turned out really nice. I had it for several years, and then sometimes I just break shit, and I do know I purposely broke that, and now I just wish I had it, which is the strange thing.
Yeah.
So
there was something I was going to mention. Your hexagonal pens,
yes,
have become quite popular.
Yeah.
But when you first originally went to do them, you had a bit of a reaction.
I had someone who inspired me to do them, and it was Mr. JP. He went and got some nuts and glued them onto a pin kit. And I bought the nuts, I held them in my hand, and when I was making chainmail, I did galvanized metal for 3 days, and I got very violently ill from that. And so I'm very sensitive to metals that are on my hands. The metal that I got poisoned me, even though it was like I held them for 10 minutes at the most. So it was JP who made the first nutty pin, and then I had the CNC, and I was like, that could cut some hex. And I still love them. My wife still has a dragon pin over here, because most of them I've given away, or I've sponsored, giveaways or something like that.
Yeah. Right. Give 2 secs so I can quickly post this question so I can read it out.
Sure.
Okay, it's from Sterling. He says, "Okay, real question. So the thoughts and beliefs you have are from books. It's not from other people's opinions and thoughts. They want you to sway you way of thinking to theirs, question mark."
Sure. What I think he's getting at is, I think there's 2 different definitions of philosophy. There is philosophy in the sense that it is the love of wisdom, and that is a person who is a servant who sees the tree of wisdom, and they sit under that so they could basically bear nutrition from the fruit of the tree of knowledge. I'm not one of those people. I'm someone who's completely different. My philosophy, the way I understand philosophy, is it's not the love of wisdom, because that is past tense. That is wisdom being handed down to you. In my sense, it is like the love to discover wise conceit. So there's 2 paths in my way. Is you could go to a book and you could learn and read from the book, and the book will basically carry you so far. But the better approach is that, you do have to go through a phase of this. But the phase that you grow up to as an adult is that it is you making the decisions on, not necessarily right or wrong, but is the truth there for you? So when I read Plato, it's not really what Plato says for the world. It's what Plato says and means for me. So it's more personal. It's more intimate. It is me when I recite and talk about what I read in Plato. I mean, I can go and read the words, and that's an example of what's there, but it's normally like, oh, well, this is my meaning from it. So it's a definitely more powerful stance, to where it's not like I just read books and it's like, oh, that person programmed me. I don't like that whatsoever. And I hope that was his answer to the question. So, or it was my answer to his question.
Yeah. When's the next skull challenge?
I'm actually going to do the skull challenge. I know I didn't do the Valentine's Day challenge, but the skull challenge is going to go on again. And we went through July, so I'll announce it in June. So I really loved the challenges, because, when you say skull to someone and it just comes out in different ways. Valentine's Day, there was Make with Dad. He basically said, with the Valentine's Day theme, it was like, well, it's not necessarily what I think Valentine's Day is. It's what pleases her. And I think he made her a skull or something like that. It was very zombie-like. I forget right now, just because my head's so full of other things. But it was an awesome example of how different meaning can mean for the individual.
Hey, I didn't catch the answer to Sterling's thing, but I just read the thing, his question. I don't know if we don't want to repeat that, but
Yeah.
if you answered it already, but I did want to. You know what? Forget it, because my dog is just completely confusing me because he keeps like going. You know how dogs go in circles? Well, and I've got the wooden floor, so it's like a little tap dance. Tap, 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 tap. He stops, thinks about it, then goes around in circles. Tap, 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 tap. Then stops and goes around again. Tap, 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 tap. And then stops and then goes around and then goes tap, 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 tap. By the way, you know why I'm doing this again and again? I want to see how long before somebody stops me. Tap, 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 and then stops and goes. Go ahead.
All right. One of the things I could actually say that you may have missed is my definition of philosophy is the love to discover wise conceit. And the word that's really important in my understanding of philosophy is conceit, because conceit is actually something that really deals again with madness. In fact, I kind of like thought about this a little bit earlier before the show. Madness, I've already kind of explained that it's like contrary to the norm to a degree. Well, so is conceit. Conceit is a very lovely word if you actually read, say, like Shakespeare or a really good romantic poet. Conceit is essentially like the love of a woman. You know, you are absolutely enamored by the woman. Your mind is completely about the woman. You are completely mad about her, right? Well, that's your mind being taken over by inspiration and understanding, and that is what your mind is focused on. And in philosophy, the one of the guys that's more modern talks about this. It's the fame of the brain. You know, when I go through manic depressive kind of scenarios where, you know, I'm learning chainmail one year, to the next year it's you know, guitar work or doing, you know, woodworking or whatever, you know, the fame of my brain is attached to those little events that are going on. And conceit's the same thing. You know, and to put this out in a religious context, and I mean no harm to anyone who is religious, but I'm just going to say when it comes down to it, in the ancient way of conceit, there is the lover version of it. But when we start talking about religion and what the mind knows, at one point or another, there was like Christian conceit, right? And it was a very beautiful thing. Your mind was filled with religious positivity, and it was great. And you had the society that all fit into this conceit, right? Well, when the word "be" actually comes and flips and becomes a poisonous word, is when, you know, an atheist shows up and says, "Well, my conceit is better than you," and then you have the crowd saying, "You're conceited, you're wrong, you're derogatory, you're horrible." And the word conceit changed from a very beautiful approach to a very ugly approach. And, you know, when we think about it in a modern sense, what's your understanding of conceit?
That's exactly.
I mean,
that's a
very positive thing for you.
Yeah, yeah. When you say that, I didn't know that. It's that origin of it, and when I think of conceit, or to concede, is to accept, you know, anything, whatever it is, a position, you know, it's to concede. Now, conceited, which comes from conceit, right? Is am I wrong?
Yeah,
conceited.
Yeah.
That person is.
Version.
So when my like day-to-day secular thought on that, conceited, is like the person is like arrogant. The person is you know, full of his own stink and loves it too, and so on and so forth. But I do know the original thing of concede, to concede, or is it conceit?
Conceit.
So conceit is a different.
Is like submitting.
Okay, so then
is about the mind.
So to me, conceit is that. It has always been that, but I guess that's not the full story. It changed.
You know, it's just the more you know, because the way language works, it's both now, unfortunately.
Well, here's the thing about what Sterling said that I remember, just to dwell on this a little bit more, is that, you know, when you have a point of view and people write it in a book form, or not even a book form, you have it is a form of trying to convince that your position is the right one. So books are set up to give you, be it a biography, or be it a philosophy book, or be it it's an argument trying to convince the person that's reading it that this line of thinking is true. Or if he says this line of, whatever he's saying is, this is the path that I see. And some people, in books will say, this is what I think, but there's other possibilities. So it's a very dynamic thing, but it is an argument. Books are an argument for a position, at the end of the day, a way of looking at things, a story. It's a position. So it's definitely an argument. So on that level, I agree with what Sterling is saying. But I think that the reader, although that may be true, and the person writing the book might be totally darn right on his position, but the reader, giving credit to the person, the human being, they're processing this information, and it's on them to collate and determine what is appropriate.
All right. Well, let's talk about this in a way that you would probably understand a little bit better. Is I know from hearing your podcast with Ryan and Rick, you don't like communism, and communism stems from, I think, a conceit, a mindset of the times and tribulations of like Karl Marx's time. Did you know that Karl Marx, at the end of his life, was actually awestruck and almost like devastated in depression because people misread him, misunderstood him? When you talk to like an American professor and you try and say there was Adam Smith in economics, and there's several guys in between, and then we get to Karl Marx, and we think that they're not related in like a discipleship. And Karl Marx was like, no, I'm in line with Adam Smith, and Adam Smith is the capitalist version of economics. He's one of the guys who first starts economics, but he's highly pro-capitalist, and Marx is completely communist, if you will. But I mean, his thing that like destroyed his heart, if you will, his being, was that people who were reading him and misreading him basically were able to take over the voice of what Karl Marx is known for nowadays. It's very strange. We've talked about it before. I think we've gone over words before, and when I actually think about society and words, especially in political terms, is it all goes back to Greece, by the way. Greece starts democracy. There's autocratic versions of stuff, and we're talking like this. The Persians are autocratic, and then basically with Plato we get to republicanism. So you get the two swings of government. Is you get ran by the people and you get ran by the power, the single individual who runs everything. And republicanism is right here. I want to use this finger in particular. Republicanism is right in the middle, where they're feigning to be as smart as these people, but they're trying to say that they're good as these people, but they're right in the middle. And republicanism is like just what that is it's the public, the people being ran by the most intelligent people. This is one of the things that I have, like, contrary to Plato, is, if you do get the masses to vote in leaders who are smarter than the masses, what happens is that you eventually get like a populace who's not intelligent enough to elect people who are the smartest people, and what's going on in republicanism that's actually really bad. And I use republicanism in no modern sense, by the way. I'm not talking about a politician who flies under the flag of republicanism, by the way. What happens is that basically the numbers become too outrageous, where the Republican politician, who is supposed to be the most intelligent person of the society to run things, gets elected in. That's no longer the case. What's happening is, Donald Trump is either well loved or well hated, but overall, he has this thick skin where he could do and make the decisions that will obviously anger some and to a very big majority, or be pleasant to some to a very big majority. If you get a naive, innocent, and good man to be a republicanism, he's going to worry about that 1% of people who don't like him for his actions, and he will never take political office because of that burden, that that horrible, like, you did things wrong kind of attitude. You'll never get a good politician in that sense. I mean, so republicanism is basically a fallacy in a sense that A, will never be smart enough to identify a legitimate person who would run things appropriately, but then the people that we do appropriate as, you know, a good person to run it, they fake it quite a bit, but they have thicker skins that allow them to take that punishment, that anguish that society throws and flings at them. So basically, you end up with a politician that's an angry dog that's willing to get whipped because he's going to just bite you because he can. He's going to take what he wants. So politics becomes really interesting when you kind of go down my line of thought.
Well, we're actually living in a very so everything is perched on a very thin wire. You know, we've constructed, not us, but us humans have constructed this society and cultures, and it all hangs on religious, even political and religious beliefs, that there's stability, and everything is chaotic. You know, below the surface, everything is chaos, and at any given moment, a series of events can unfold, and everything is totally wild and toppled and completely just severed from the norms that we believe are there, holding, gluing things together. I think that there's facades upon facades, you know, structures that we've created, and we live it. But to go back and to finalize this part of it, I think that we've given a good sort of a nice deep overview, at least, of the thought processes and ideas that you have and that you go through, and there's more to come, right, from you.
Well, you're talking about order and chaos. So the question is, Eloy.
No, I don't want to continue necessarily, because I do want to. So look, I want to touch. We'll go into what you're going to explain, but I want to sort of allow us to come back, and I want to sort of package it nicely before we round home. Sure. So just keep that in mind, that we're going to be rounding home, but I want to bring it back to focusing on your channel and you before we wrap up. But go ahead. Order and chaos.
I think one of the questions that I would have you for, order and chaos. I mean, just answer me one or the other. Which one would you rather have, order or chaos?
In a broad general sense, or what?
Just in the yes or no binary answer, order or chaos.
Okay, so if to me, it would be more nuanced, like in different levels, because there's different levels, right? But if I had to choose between order and chaos, I just look to the earth, to our planet, to us. All this is orderly, and I would go with orderly. But with that said, there's a big, but there's a few caveats involved in that. But if I had to choose, like, bottom line, order would be better than chaos.
Yeah, I'm chaos. So let me try and bring some Plato into this, because I read a book. It's very unread. There's not many books that try and explain this book. In the Republic, which is read widely, there's this thing called the Myth of the Cave, and I think a lot of people understand the Myth of the Cave. However, in the book Ion, there is a myth of the lodestone. And what it is when we get back to inspiration again, we get into the muse, or the god, inspires a poet. And basically, a lodestone is a magnet. So the magnet itself is the god, the muse. And then the first iron ring in the magnet kind of chain that's going to be built is you have the muse, you have the poet, and then you start having, like, the audience grow from the poet. And basically, as we all know with magnets, as far as the first iron ring that gets magnetized by the lodestone, the magnet, is strongest, and as you start stacking on, it gets weaker and weaker and weaker. So basically, when it gets to order, if a god or a muse basically set the foundation of what we believe in, and then he disappears, and then his his poet, his prophet exists at the top, but through time he now fades away. But that understanding gets transferred from one generation to the next generation to the next generation. What we end up is we have order at the beginning, yes, but inevitably at the end, we're always going to end with chaos. We're going to be less strong and less powerful, what the muse, the God, had taught us. So it becomes basically a fallacy of the human mind through generational time, not just our lifetime, but, what I'm saying when I read Plato, it's directly from him to me. There's a little bit about translation between he wrote in Greek and I'm reading in English. But I mean, these things come very strong when you get inspired and read them and put them into the forms that I'm talking about. Like, it's not just me reading them and following into the order of what he says. It's me. I write notes and I draw pictures a lot. I'm reconstructing what they're saying in imagery on the way that I feel them to be. So
Right.
basically, I could skip from being the bottom magnet here to being much closer to his writings there.
Okay, so I want to respond to all that. So yes, I understand. So look, this is my thought on all that. Preliminary thought is that we have at best case scenario 80 years of life. We're born into this world. I mean, at best, right? We're born into this world in a time period not of our choosing, with rules and cultural norms not of our choosing, and we grow up in this situation. So, we have certain cultural norms that we grow up in. We live it. We don't have time to make these drastic changes. I believe in the order. In order, it is on that scale a good thing. It would be a crappy thing to be born in a turbulent time where there's marauders and whatnot, and then philosophers and this and that. So I'm totally pro the order, on certain levels, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
We just have X amount of time to do things in. We can't reinvent the wheel. I mean, we could, but we will not enjoy the fruits of it, if at all, if that even occurs. So, I don't know. I just wanted to say
where knowledge exists?
Where knowledge exists. Well, knowledge exists in the mind, in the experience. Knowledge exists from what's been handed to us and through experience. I would say that.
To me, my answer, knowledge exists in communication. So knowledge is one thing where we're trying to get to a pure understanding of something. And as we communicate, knowledge is transferred, right? But you can't just grab the dictionary and read it and think you're going to run forward with it. It takes understanding to where you're actually using and manipulating the communication in a form to really transfer better communication or better knowledge. So people who are better communicators are the ones we identify as the most knowledgeable and intelligent people we see. So knowledge is actually literally within communication. If you want to be smart at all, learn how to talk, learn how to write, and learn to the depth of the words that you understand and that you sling around. I mean, that's the greatest advice I could give to anybody.
Yeah. And then there will be people that will challenge if what you're putting out is, I mean, that's the beauty of it, right? That it's a give and take. And I guess that to wrap this portion up, the idea is to always reach a better understanding of a truer place to be standing at. At least for me. What do you think? The idea of a conversation of ideas being exchanged is to reach a better place of knowledge, a clearer understanding.
Yeah, see, when we get to order, and this is one of the areas where I think order falls on its face, is where basically order will say, okay, it'll make the contrast of good and bad, right? and basically there's going to be a line where this is good over here and this is bad over here, and we're taking stuff that, you know, is out in the world and we're putting it in this bin and we're throwing away this. Well, unfortunately, a lot of the things that we discover in the world ends up being one of the greatest things that we ever deal with is always found in the bad. I mean, you like barbecue, right?
Sorry,
I think most everyone likes barbecue, right?
I like
barbecue is one of those things in life where it was basically made by the slaves because it was the offcuts, it was the reject of all the things that people thought were pure in the animal. So they gave it to people who were undesirable or, you know, below them. And basically they were just like, well, we got to make this better. So they added different spices, they cooked it in a unique way. And the next thing you know, I hate to say it in this contrast, but the master went out and said, well, let me try it. He tries it and it's the greatest thing he ever tasted. You know, hot wings are the same thing. I mean, hot wings 30 years ago, you could have bought them because they were thrown away, you know, like, you know, pounds and pounds of them for 50 cents. You know, it was like they were so cheap, people found them, really, you know, said, hey, we could add a different spice, we could cook them in a different way. Next thing you know, hot wings are, you know, $1.50 a piece for one stupid wing that they would throw away in the past. You know, so there's a lot of beauty in the things that like are found to be not pure. You know, so when you actually deal with order and this is the best thing we could accomplish, this and that, you're putting yourself in the box. You're not looking outside the box. This is what's pure. This is what's good for me. This is what's good for everybody. And unfortunately, you know, people who are off to the side, they're going to turn what you threw away and they're going to turn it into a lot better thing. I mean, the palette challenge, I mean, look at that. I'm a person, I love hardwoods. I love exotic woods. I participate every time in the palette challenge since I've started. And it's because it is that immaculate thing of taking something that is like something that I would normally throw away and I'm going to turn it into something beautiful. And it's very inspirational. It's very much warms, you know, my understanding.
All right. So we're gonna go back to the woodworking briefly here. What is going to go on next for you on your channel? And are you going to be injecting a little bit of your ideas and your knowledge in your videos? Is that a possibility?
Well, this is the Mad Maker Show, and I've gone mad for this. I think in my videos, I am going to actually become more creative in actually the way I present my videos, this and that. But I don't think I'm going to discuss conversations like I have here on the Mad Maker Show. No.
Okay. And why is that?
I don't know. I mean, a lot of these topics that we've touched upon, you know, religion, politics for a little bit, you know, the way we actually cope with each other in society. There are a lot of topics that a lot of people will be angered on or will have a bone to pick in one way or another. And they won't understand the flexibility that I deal with. You know,
right.
People are very limited in their purity. They love what they know. They love holding on to what they know, and they don't like hearing things that are contrary to what they know.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess, you know, to shake someone's beliefs, even if it's just a conversation, it can be uncomfortable and disturbing. But there's a huge segment of people out there, I don't know what number, that enjoy pondering such things, you know, to a greater lesser degree. So I totally get it. So let me ask you, did you enjoy it, the show?
I did. I still have one more story to go through if you want to indulge me a little bit.
Let me ask you.
I've absolutely enjoyed this conversation, and I'm happy that it was more public than a conversation just between me and you.
Well, you know, I appreciate it very much. Will you come back and see us?
I definitely will.
All right,
you know,
right on.
I'm a moth to the flame of madness. And actually, that's a really good story that I like telling about you. Is we had our first really big conversation, and then you went out and made a figurine, and everyone loved it, and then you burn it. And that was like, we could almost mark our conversation from that video because I know that it happened like within a week after our conversation.
It's a total fact that we had a conversation, and it was one of the first times, or maybe the first time, that we delved into these topics behind the scenes. And at the time, I carved a statue of a lady, and at the end of the video, I burnt that thing down. And the premise and the whole idea is in the video, because I say it, I think I said, we create and we destroy, and then we create again. And it was all due to our conversation, because you had never busted out with this sort of conversation with me, and it was very thought-provoking and inspiring, frankly. You know, I don't like a thing to be, I'm okay with a thing being shallow and surface just for the sake of it. I'm okay with that. But I'm also very much okay with a thing being deep and that you have to search for, or has layers that you have to, I guess, peel back. I'm totally down with that as well. So, you know, I burnt that statue down to the ground, and guess what? I'll do it again.
I'm sure you would.
All right.
So, Jamie, are there any other questions?
No, everyone's going on about having barbecue now and things like that. Yeah.
Well,
all right.
Hit us with places. By the way, I have all the places, links that folks can find you and JP, all of us, down in the description. But hit us with if there's any shout outs, anything that you'd like the folks there to know, and hit us with it.
As you guys know, my channel Shogun Jimi on YouTube, and I'm on Facebook under that as well. Through those big Facebook groups, my channel there, or my page there, has grown pretty phenomenally. And then I now actually, through Harnealmedia, I got a website up and running. Unfortunately, it's like 30% done, so I'm still trying to tease and toy with that. Been playing with Photoshop. So those are the places I could be found. shogunjimi.com.
Awesome, dude. Thank you so much, man. JP?
Well, apart from 95% of the show going straight over my head, all my YouTube and all that stuff, all my social medias can be found at jp-woodwork.com. And that's everything.
All right, guys. Well, listen, I want to thank you. Remember, so I just want to leave you guys with a few thoughts. If my dog would stop tapping, I hope. Yeah, he's about to jump into the. This is the Mad Maker show, so let's
make some socks for him.
You know, I was thinking that today, but today he's on the walking in circles type thing, and he's not letting up. So I want to leave you with a few thoughts. Once I start the thought, I just want to let the audience know, and I know this as a fact, once I begin the thought, he's going to start walking around again, because he waits, just like all the helicopters and motorcycles and airplanes outside and airboats and ambulances. When I'm about to film something or do something specific, everything, it's like on cue, like the Truman Show. Everybody, okay, he's about to record. Everybody, go. And it's like, beep, beep, biplanes and everything. He just stepped out. So I want to leave you with this thought. So this is the Mad Maker show. And again, the idea is to interview these exceptional people with completely amazing and different points of views and thoughts. And we want to mark, you know, and timestamp all these interviews so that there's placement and people can go back and check them out. They will become podcasts at some point. And so I just enjoy this thoroughly, and I thank you guys for visiting us every Tuesday. And we'll be back next week, JP and I. And well, have a great week. You know, do some cool stuff, and we'll talk soon. All right, bye-bye, guys.